Yeah.
Okay, good. How many of you have seen this word, epigenetics? Anyone? See it on PBS? No, seriously, I had a thing on PBS the other night. This is a word you're going to see. We actually discovered epigenetics in the 70s, and the National Institute of Health and some of the other big science research organizations are starting to really look into this. And it was really discovered when we were looking for a way to figure out why things are happening so fast in the human body, and these diseases are developing, and changes in the gene structure of the human is happening way, way too fast for evolutionary concepts. And I don't want to go into evolution, but the more we study in evolution, the more that it kind of comes unraveled. But in the last 20 or 30 years, we've seen this unbelievable acceleration in things like diabetes, childhood diabetes, ADHD, all these conditions like this. And so they started looking at this, at what's going on here, because there's no explanation in our theories that we have on how these things are changing so fast and why. So they started looking into what's going on. And came up with epigenetics. And in our generation, and I'm going to get into this, because what we're finding out is that the theories of natural medicine, of the environment controlling the cell and not the other way around, is really more correct than we ever thought before. And in other words, in fact, medicine today, our new treatment programs are going into, well, this is a genetic problem. What do you hear that all the time? This is a genetic problem. This is a genetic problem. And the idea of we're going to go in, we're going to develop their therapy where we're going to change your genes. What we're finding out with epigenetics, this is not the thing to do. And this is going to be, in my opinion, gene therapy, if we continue down the exact same road we're going, is going to be the biggest Pandora box we've ever run into. In fact, it'll be worse than drugs. So let's kind of talk about this tonight, and let's talk about environment, because environment is what this is all about. But I do want to just read something on this epigenetics, and you'll understand this when we get done. This is from Basic Clinical Pharmacology and Toxicology, 2008, a study. And we're going to get into all this endocrine disruptors and the switches and all that kind of stuff in a minute, but this was the conclusion we came to. We propose that recent epidemics of chronic diseases now being observed in children, such as type 2 diabetes, asthma, ADHD, and obesity, have an environmental, dietary, and behavioral component, since classical genetic mutations cannot account for such large increases in these diseases over a short period of time. It's exactly what we just said a minute ago. It is becoming clear that all complex diseases are a result of gene-environment interactions, and that epigenetic modification of gene function during critical periods in development plays a role in the etiology of disease. In other words, what we're going to talk about tonight is really the newest information on how diseases occur. And the reason why I asked about PBS was PBS did a special on evolution not long ago, and they had the best pictures on this stuff. And we can find out it's much more complicated. So what we're finding is not really something wrong with us. We don't have defective genes. We are who we're supposed to be. Our problem is the genes are not functioning properly. In fact, we're even finding out now that even multiple damaged genes can work fine, or perfect genes could not work fine. And this is what epigenetics is all about. So let's kind of start off with some basic information. Let's just talk about a barnyard first. And let's put a cow or a sheep or something in here. Okay. Okay. And if this is our little guy sitting in here, and this barnyard has a really nice environment in it. He's got good grass and good water, and all the good things he's supposed to have, sunshine, and all the waste products are taken out. Is that little sheep going to be healthy, or is it going to be unhealthy? More than likely. He'll probably be healthy. But if we change his environment and we start putting all kinds of bad things in here, poisons and pesticides, and we don't clean up the feces, we don't drain the water, and we don't give them fresh water, what happens to the sheep? He gets sick. Now, was there anything wrong with the sheep? The reason why he got sick? He was reacting to his environment, correct? That's the concept that I want to go into next. And let's take our little sheep out. And let's put some human cells in there. Let's just say maybe this is a liver or heart cells. Could be any kind of cell you want. Eyeball cells, skin cells. You got your genetic material. And each one of them are sitting next here, and they're sitting in an environment. And their environment is called the extracellular matrix. Or when this theory was first come up with back in the 1800s, we called it the milieu. I don't know how they come up with that name. But this matrix is fed by arteries, which blood brings food and water and nutrients and all that stuff in. And then you have veins that take out the blood. You also have lymph that is responsible for moving waste products. And all this is monitored by the nervous system. It goes up to the brain, and the brain correlates all this information. So what we're finding is that this environment here plays the exact same role as what we saw in the barnyard. If these cells are normal liver cells and their environment's good, the cells will what? They'll be healthy. And if they're not, then the cells are going to react in an adverse way, and they will mutate and they will do other things, and they will either become diseased or malfunction, and they don't work very well. That's a fairly simple concept, but believe it or not, in regular medicine, in orthodox medicine, the theory is just the opposite. It's not that the environment's bad, they're saying the cells are bad. The cells can't adapt to the bad environment. And what we're saying is just the opposite. There's nothing wrong with the cells. We need to make sure that environment's good. So when you hear guys like me talking, you need to have good clean water, and you need to make sure you're eating good quality food, and you're doing all those things. When we say environment, we're not just talking about this environment here, whether it's hot or cold. We're talking about the cellular environment inside of your body. What's bathing in your cells here? And this is really the key. And science is starting to find out something new. Now, epigenetics goes further than this entire cell. It goes in and it's saying this environment here will take and determine whether these genes are going to manifest their function properly in that cell, and it'll pass it from generation to generation. So you can have perfectly normal genes. Let's say a gene that we now know that, say diabetes or one of these other conditions, and a child's born with this. The mom and the dad may have perfectly normal genes, but if there was an environmental problem in the mom or dad that flipped these genes on and off, then it's going to be passed to the parents. And we'll know it goes up to 4 generations. We also know from experiments that that can be changed back to normal. Okay? Sometimes it happens fast, sometimes it happens slow. So let's look at that and see how that occurs. So we've got all this going on here. Now, anything that goes wrong with any of these things feeding the system can cause a problem. Or if you put bad stuff in there, it can cause a problem. Okay? But that's our concept. Now what I want to do is I want to go inside one of these little gene things here. Let's draw a gene up here. Pretty good artist, huh? I'm going to draw like a little light switch here. A little light switch here. And here are our genes. Now, our genes are our basic coding for everything that happens in our body. All the different things that are going on. Let's see if I still was focused in there. All the things that are going on in the body's all patterned. So we don't want to mix things up. If you were, if you took your genes and you put it in my genes, if you implanted your genes in my, I wouldn't work very well, and vice versa, because we're all designed to work with our own. So what happens is when this environment goes either bad or good, or it goes bad, these switches flip off and on. And if one of these switches, and this is called epigenome, one of these things flip on, you can have a perfectly good gene, and it doesn't do its job. Okay? And we also found out, and this is new, that you can have damaged genes like this, and yet the gene will still function properly if these switches are flipped on and off in the right sequence, which I found fascinating. Now, something I've just learned recently is that we know, for example, and there's been some studies, and we'll go over those in a minute, the simple things like vitamins and minerals will turn these things off and on. Emotional things, environmental disruptors, and we're going to go into that in just a second, will turn these things on and off. But we also know that this switch is important, but there's another switch that turns this switch off and on. And it's even more important than this switch, because it's contacted to the nervous system, correlating everything, and we know there's switches turning this switches. So this series of switches are very, very important in how your body functions. And what we're going to go into is details on not necessarily this right here, because that's what you're born with and that's what you get. And I'm not saying we don't have genetic diseases. We do have genetic diseases where people's genes are broken and they do not function. And we don't know how to fix that yet. But those things manifest early in life. We're talking about this rapid development of these diseases that are just overtaking our country. I know I'm getting old, but when I was a kid, we didn't have ADHD and learning disabilities and all this stuff. What the heck is going on here, you know? Diabetes is running rampant. 20 years ago, I used to say diabetes would be the #1 disease in the country, and it wasn't even on the charts to speak of 20 years ago. Now, it is literally going to break the country if we don't do something. That's how bad diabetes is. And of course, I think 50% of our kids today are on some type of psychotropic drug, mind-altering drug, because they just don't function properly, because these genes are not manifesting properly. Okay, so let's go back and let's just kind of do this. This is that little black dot in the cell, but if you look at this whole deal here as our environment, what kind of things will get inside this cell and turn these switches where they shouldn't be? Well, it's what we've done for years and years and had good success with, things like food allergies, metals, parasites, bacteria, and those type of things. And in my clinic, those of you, my patients, you know, the first thing we always go to is the stomach usually, and we fix that stomach. And then we start looking at what's getting into the body that shouldn't be there. So I kind of want to go through these things. But one of the most important things that I think is really a problem, we're going to get into that in a second in detail, is what we call endocrine disruptors. And these are the big guys that really do it. And I'm going to show you exactly how that happens. But let's talk about just things like food allergies and relatively simple things. I've seen many children as well as some adults with pretty serious stuff like seizures and those type of neurological issues. We've had simple problems like food allergies that have made a huge difference. And you know, and you think, my goodness, how could a food cause a kid to have seizures? Well, it's pretty simple. And you think, why would that occur? You know, food ought to be processed properly. Well, these kids and the moms, and we've had generations now, people raised on trans fats. Remember the big brouhaha in the news, New York? Outlawed trans fats and all that? Well, here's the reason why. A cis fat is your good fat. And it's shaped like this. And a trans fat is shaped like this. And when you start replacing trans fats in the cis fats, if you notice here, here's a nice closed up cell wall between cells. So if this is the inside of the gut and you have a piece of chicken that comes in here, that chicken sits right there. This cell processes this chicken properly and it brings it across in a form that the body recognizes it and the body doesn't have any problem with it. But if this piece of chicken comes over here, what do you got? You got holes. It comes on in, then you start an antigen-antibody complex and you get an immune response. And when you get an immune response, this can take many, many forms. You can get things like migraine headaches, you can have rheumatoid arthritis, you can have all kinds of autoimmune problems, lupus, and the list goes on and on and on. But that's a huge shock to the body. And when you shock the body like this, it can potentially flip those switches. Okay? That's just something simple like a food allergy. Well, these kids, they're being born with their tissues, it's like Swiss cheese. It's not healthy. And their tissues all over their body. And then you get these responses. So that's one of the things just from a nutritional standpoint. Metals, which we're starting to see a lot of, and there's big controversy on vaccinations. We give our kids, when I was a kid, we took 3 basic vaccinations, polio, I think, I don't remember, maybe smallpox and another one. It really wasn't a big insult. But the kids today take 92 vaccines before they get in first grade. That's a lot. And they're adding more and more and more. And these vaccines do a couple things. And, I'm not going to say yay or nay whether they're good or bad. I don't have a problem with the theory of vaccinations. My problem is the volume we're giving these kids and the way we're administering it. If you're really interested, there's a medical physician, Dr. Tenpenny, who gets into this big, and she does a good job at this. But what happens is you get 2 different things going on. There's a lot of metals in these vaccinations. They're used as preservatives and other things and antibacterial type of things, mercury and aluminum and all kinds of stuff. And these metals can get in here, and if this child has this issue here, of course with a vaccination they just inject it into the system, so it's just bam, it's right there. But even if they take this stuff orally, it can get on through into the body too. And when you get metals in the body, they really become what we call endocrine disruptors. And they also can cause problems and cause erosion of this lining here and open this up too. If you get my food allergy tape, I have microscopic pictures of this, and you can look at that. So metals is a biggie. The parasites and viruses, you get these kids that are they start off eating total junk at a young age. They have this situation going on, and then the bacteria, which we carry a lot of bacteria and viruses in our gut all the time, all over our body actually. These little guys can slip right on through these holes too, and when they get in there, the body gets pretty excited. And if it goes on day after day after day, you get a shock to the system. These little kids, ear infections all the time, coughing, sneezing constantly, from the time they're born until they stay on antibiotics. Antibiotics messes all this up too. So the viruses and parasites and bacteria get in the system, so we're constantly bombarding our children with these really big insults to the immune system and to the body itself. And it's very difficult on them. They don't have an immune system built up yet. And they're really, really sick. And the last thing, which I think is a huge one, and it's really hardly looked at as all, is what we call xenobiotics. And the xenobiotics are your pesticides and your herbicides and all this stuff. and this is a biggie. And I'm not an earth worshiper or anything like that, but this is pretty straight. This is big time stuff. The EPA and a whole lot of folks have been looking at this for a long, long time. In fact, in 2009, they actually instituted a study to study 87,000 different chemicals that we've manufactured that are in our environment at any time. And it's been well published that any of us in this room right now, if we took body samples, we'd find at least 250 chemicals in our body that potentially could harm us. And I'm going to show you how they harm us in just a second, down on the cell level. Okay. Now, what does an endocrine disruptor mean? Well, our endocrine system, check this for me, because my thing keeps slipping off. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. An endocrine disruptor works like this. Let's, okay, now we're back down on the inside of our cell. Okay, let's look at the cell wall first. We just have a cell here, nucleus and all that kind of stuff. This cell wall is like our little corral around our yard, and it doesn't want anything in and it doesn't want anything out that it doesn't approve of. Okay? So it's got all kinds of receptor sites and all kinds of stuff here. So let's say that, you remember, we got another cell here. So let's say that blood brings in some nutrients, like B12, and the cell needs B12. B12 is going to be packaged up, brought over to the B12 receptor site, and if the cell likes what it sees, it's going to open up a door and let it in, and then it's going to close. Okay? So these things are crucially important, and what an endocrine disruptor does is it disrupts this process right here. It either opens a door that shouldn't be open, or keeps one closed that should be open, or it just turns into a total disaster. And when you start having things go in and out of the cell that are not approved, what do you think happens? It gets in here and starts disrupting the cell, starts flipping those switches on and off. Okay? So let's look at this thing. Since we're talking about endocrine, let's just talk about, let's say this is a cell here. Let me go over here and make it better. Let's make this an estrogen cell, or a cell that manufactures estrogen. Okay? So it's going to produce estrogen. Now, how does it do that? How does it know when to produce estrogen, and how much to produce, and when to stop? That's your genetic code, okay? You're going to produce different estrogen than you're going to produce, and I'm going to produce. So what we have is we have little machines that shape like this, okay? And when this machine comes over and it's told by the nervous system, hey, we need to produce some estrogen. So it's going to go over here, it's going to hook itself in here, and when this thing is hooked up like this, it starts producing estrogen, okay? Now, we also have little hooks like this. They don't necessarily look like this. I'm trying to use this as an example. So if we put this in here and it produces estrogen, it keeps putting estrogen and pushing estrogen and pushing estrogen, and it never stops making, what happens? You end up with breast cancer and things like that, right? So you got to pull this thing out. So it's just important in the body function to make stuff, to stop making stuff as it is to make stuff. That makes sense? You can hurt yourself with your own body's production just as bad as you can not making enough. So what we have is another machine. So when this thing goes over and plugs in here, we have another machine that's shaped like this with little hooks on it. So when it's time to pull this out, it'll come and pull this. So let me redraw this so it'll be plain. Let's bring this on over here. And I'm going to draw some hooks. Okay. So now it's a complicated process, but that's basically what we're dealing with. And now this happens for every single solitary thing that's manufactured in your body. Everything, whether it's insulin, whether it's estrogen, whether it's testosterone, whether it's enzymes to digest your food, all of this kind of stuff. So an endocrine disruptor is something that does one of three things. One, it comes in here and blocks this, so this can't go in there. In that case, you wouldn't make estrogen. Or, let's leave that there. Or, it goes in there and it blocks this, so you can't get it out. Okay. Or, it blocks the information to tell all of this what to do. Now, let's get back to our epigenetics. When the switchers are not flipped on right, the information telling this what to do is all messed up. So this is what's happening to our kids and to us. This system is getting disrupted by all of these chemicals. And there's one more thing I'm going to show you here too. And it's causing this massive dysfunction in our bodies. Now there's one other thing that happens, and we see this in pesticides and things like this. We're manufacturing chemicals. I think we're up to about 125,000 chemicals now that we don't know whether we can get them out of the body or not. They're called generally recognized, and that's what these guys do this. They may look exactly like this little machine here, and they'll go fit right in here, and they'll make this thing go, but you can't get it out. Okay. So this is what happens in some of our estrogens and things like that, you know, that are artificially made. They just don't have the little hooks so we can get them out of there. And we have thousands and thousands of chemicals that this is what they do. And some of them we have no research at all, because all we're doing is testing lethal dose. Does it kill you or not? That's not what we're talking about here. These are chemicals that disrupt this. And it may just disrupt a